Hello, I'm Zygmunt Kazicki, and this is another special program about gun safety. And it's my pleasure to have Kathy and Ginger here, who are supporting the national effort for gun violence awareness, Wear Orange Day. And their organization, Moms Demand Action, is supporting this effort. And so I'm going to ask Kathy and Ginger to give us some information that we can all appreciate. Kathy?
Well, the first thing is just to tell the story in terms of how did this get started. So as many movements have, there's a personal story behind it. And this involves a 15-year-old Chicago young girl, Hadiya Pendleton, who in 2013 actually performed at President Obama's inauguration in Washington, D.C. Probably within 2 weeks after leaving Washington, D.C. and returning home, on her way home from school, she was caught in some gunfire and unfortunately was hit and passed away from that tragic event. Her friends decided that they had to do something. They had to do something to say to Chicago at that point that this person was important and we need to remember her. And that's where the Wear Orange first came from. And they chose the color of orange because their thought was, we know that orange is sold in stores, and it's particularly around hunting season, and that the reason hunters are told to wear orange is because it's for protection. Yeah. So they decided that that made sense. Wear orange because it's saying we need protection, and we need to honor Hadiya to make sure that people realize we've got to start protecting the young people in our city. And basically from that moment, it started growing and then evolved into both a National Gun Violence Awareness Day, Wear Orange, where it eventually became a national movement.
And now they were up to 220 million people in one day, just because of these young friends in Chicago, that they were so dedicated and took action and decided to do this. And this was the south side of Chicago. Last week I saw a movie about the south side of Chicago, Barbershop 3.
Yeah.
And it addresses the gun violence issue. It's very poignant.
Yeah.
And there's a segment about a ceasefire, and there's a segment about locking up guns within the barbershop because they don't want this to happen in their community. So I think it is an important message, and I think it's great that these young people in this city did take this action. And what we're going to show now is a video, and it's going to help us understand the spirit of what happened and why we chose to have our Wear Orange Day.
Gunned down while trying to take shelter from the rain.
She was a majorette, and just last weekend she was in Washington, D.C. performing at the inauguration.
The spread of gun violence continues. Another shooting. Police have identified
That was an inspiring video, and if you want to see it again, you can go online and do so. But let me ask you a question that's related to that. What are some of the gun violence facts the public needs to be aware of? Ginger?
Well, I think one of the most alarming things is that in 2016, for the first time in 60 years, death by guns will actually exceed death by automobiles. And I think that's a pretty alarming statistic. Another one is that on an average day, and this goes up regularly, but right now, 91 Americans are killed by guns on any given day here in this country. And twice as many Americans are injured by gun violence as are killed by guns.
Let me stop there for a second. If 5 soldiers are killed in Afghanistan, it makes the national news.
Yes.
And everybody's concerned. And in 5 states, probably the flags are lowered to half staff. If 91 Americans are killed in America today, what do we do?
And that's probably why this day is about gun violence awareness, because unfortunately what we hear about are the tragic mass shootings.
Yeah.
We hear about those, and we should, but what we don't hear about is what is happening every single day. And when we collectively bring all of those facts together, that's when it begins to give a truer picture about how alarming this issue is,
Yeah.
and why it needs to be addressed, and simply why more Americans need to be aware of what the statistics are.
So tell me some more about the statistics, even though these are not numbers I like to hear.
They're not numbers anyone wants to hear,
Yeah.
and there can always be great debates about what numbers are the true numbers. And so
Yeah.
everyone has to do some of their own research.
Yeah.
And all of this information is coming from everytownresearch.org. But another fact would be that America's gun murder rate is 20 times that of other developed countries. So again, if you look around the world and where we stand, in terms of what's happening in our country as opposed to other countries, we have a much greater death due to the gun violence. Gun assaults are increasing each year. So even though you'll hear statistics in terms of crime rates going down, if you look at what crimes are still happening, the gun assaults actually are increasing. An average, and this one here probably is the one I think that should concern people the most, an average of 7 young people are killed daily by guns. Now that doesn't mean that they're being, they're like idea that they're getting caught in gunfire. Many times it's simply that there's guns in the homes that haven't been stored properly, and the young people are getting a hold of them, and the tragedy is happening after that. There's 2 times as many Americans injured with guns as killed with them. So again, when we think about gun violence, sometimes we think about deaths, but you also have to consider the injuries that happen with the guns and what kind of a tragedy that brings into families and tragedies that brings to communities. There's nearly 12,000 gun murders in the U.S. each year. And again, what's interesting about that fact is that although we know our crime rates are falling, that number doesn't seem to be moving. So it's not going down the same way that other crime rates are going down.
Now, I know that we're not the most violent country in the world, but we're up in the top. And we're 20 times more than other developed countries to have gun violence. So it says something about the risk factor that exists in our country. And if we were looking at an illness and it was 20 times more likely that somebody was going to die from the illness, we would try to do everything we could to reduce that, particularly if we saw that in other countries they could do that. And we would use our resources to get there, which makes me think that we have room for improvement.
Well, and it has to be something where we look at the facts and then we start having a conversation about what can we do that makes sense. Again, what's that logical gun sense type of legislation that we need to enact?
Yeah.
So that's the purpose behind June 2nd, is to really get people to start having that conversation.
So what is the primary goal of the Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America on June 2nd?
Well, one of the goals always in anything we do is to honor anyone that's been impacted by gun violence.
Okay.
So it's to honor those families, to honor those individuals that have lost their lives or been injured by guns. Another one is to raise awareness about the gun violence issues, and that's why we just talked about some of the statistics that are behind what's happening. And again, gave that website where people could go on and do some of their own research.
And I think it's also that we are learning that we must do more, because you've just been pointing out the severity of the problem, and that we must do more to raise the awareness in communities and to get people involved in doing something about the problem.
And there is room for improvement here. And it's good that the nonviolent crime rate in this country is dropping, but it is alarming that the number of people killed by guns is actually not going in the direction we'd like it to. So what activities will be happening in the Great Lakes Bay area to recognize the Wear Orange movement on June the 2nd, which is a Thursday this year.
Well, one of the things we want to do is just say to everybody, you can be part of this movement. You don't have to join a group. You can be part of the movement simply by talking to your friends about it that day, letting them know what that day represents, how that day got started, and by encouraging people to wear orange. Use that symbol to get the message out and to show the power of the people in terms of wanting to say we need to have a conversation in our country about this issue. What other?
Well, nationally, we hope that this will be an even bigger event in its second year than it was last year. And we have a dozen prominent national media brands plus a series of iconic landmarks which will turn orange on June 2nd. And also we have some magazines that are participating: Vogue, Cosmopolitan, Essence, Marie Claire, and Women's Health. They've all signed on to take part in our effort, and there'll be more information coming soon.
Part of that information too that's just kind of developing and just being released is there are communities that are working on petitions to deliver to mayors, encouraging mayors to designate that day as an official, Gun Violence Awareness Day, wear orange. We're also in the Great Lakes Bay area. We plan on bringing our group together to have a picnic, and basically in recognition of Heidi's life, but also, and again, in recognition of anyone that's been impacted by gun violence.
And people can find out about the picnic by going to your website?
If they would go to just wearorange.org, that's the national website that's being used to direct.
Wearorange.org, okay.
That's the national website that's being used to direct everyone to what's happening in your own community.
Okay, so they could go to any community that has an event planned then.
Right, because once you go to that website, if you put in your zip code, it will take you to what's been registered in your area to acknowledge that day. And
So like-minded people can find each other on
you
June 2nd.
can. And even if there aren't like-minded people in your
Yeah.
community, it's about standing up yourself and saying, this is important, and I want to acknowledge this day by wearing orange.
Well, I think everybody should count the number of orange shirts or whatever they see on that day, just to see if maybe that stands out. That would be an
Oh, and
interesting.
on Facebook?
Right, it'd be, another thing people can do. These are simple things that you can do. So one of the fascinating things about how the movement got started was through the teens using social media to
Yeah.
spread the word about what they were doing in Chicago.
Oh,
And so we can do the same thing. We can use our own social media tools, change our picture orange, post an orange picture, of wearing orange that
Sure.
day. Simply to spread that message to our friends and letting people know we're concerned about this issue. We want to be involved.
yeah, and Facebook has, I think, over 1 trillion people on the system now, which is amazing. Can reach a lot of people. So what will be happening nationally on June 2nd? What should we be looking for there?
Well, like Ginger mentioned, nationally there will be probably things coming out from the magazines that are supporting. But the other big thing they're working on, and none of these sites yet have been announced, but we know that there will be some announcements coming out about skyline areas that will be turned orange. So we haven't been given official notice on which ones have been approved, but we know that that's one of the efforts that's going across the nation, is trying to turn certain parts of cities orange. So we
Yeah.
know that that day exists.
And the real emphasis here is for people to stop and think about this, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's really what we want people to do, is stop and think about this, so that the rest of the year maybe they can start directing some energy towards what they think is important to stop violence.
Right. Our hope would be that people get involved with the Wear Orange Day,
Yeah.
and then from there they begin to do more research about what the Moms Demand Action group is all about, and maybe we'll make a decision to join our group.
Yeah. I as you probably know, I'm not a woman. I'm not transgender either. But it seems to me as if women have more nurturing in them than I do as a man. And I'm not surprised that women have taken this on as a thing to be an advocate for. And I really do appreciate that. And I think all of us do, because, women have been so instrumental in putting societies together. And I'm hoping that people who are watching this realize that this is a supportive thing. This is a positive thing. This isn't a protest. This is actually to build up a community, to bring people together in in a very peaceful way, actually.
Right, and we think it's real important that people know that although the name is Moms Demand Action,
Yeah, I know.
we welcome
I know.
everybody.
I'm wearing an orange shirt already.
Right.
I've been convinced. I'm sure. And you see, I have a little lapel here, orange
Right.
flag. So there is room for guys. And that's
Absolutely.
where I was going with this.
Right.
Actually, is to say, you know, men ought to be thinking about getting involved,
Yes.
let their feminine side out, whatever, and become a little bit more nurturing. And this is a good way to do that. With your organization being a lead in this, that's great.
So June 2nd,
June
that's the
2nd.
day we
June
hope to
2nd.
see lots of orange,
Lots of
Yes.
orange, lots of people enjoying
having the
the day
conversation.
Yes.
and having a healthy conversation about, I guess, preventing violence and creating a different environment for our children.
And-
Hopefully.
Right, talking about gun sense legislation.
Gun sense legislation. Okay. Well, thank you for listening to this message, and I hope that you're able to take advantage of this June 2nd event. And make sure you go online to
WearOrange.org.
wearorange.org to get more information in your community so that you can participate and have a good time at it. Thank you.
Thank you.